The song that was playing just now is the one that Daddy referred to yesterday about the bindis, the dots. Don't forget the dot of drama. Recognize yourself as the dot, the soul, and remember the dot who's the ocean. And this morning's topic, the discovery of the self and the renunciation of the self. And I had selected this topic early this morning thinking that Baba had mentioned the whole question of renouncing the consciousness of I as a major factor in the last Murli. And then I suppose I shouldn't have been surprised, but I was, because the whole of Daddy's class, or most of Daddy's class, was the discovery of I. And so I thought, well, okay, good marks for synchronicity, because I hadn't had time to consult Daddy on the topic I was going to take, and then I don't think she actually heard Miraben tell us the title of the class today because she was occupied, and so I thought, well, something's working. So, in fact, yes, this morning's class, at least in terms of the discovery of I. And within that, in a way, really just to recap, I know that for many souls here, the discovery of I, the knowledge of the soul, was a very big factor in coming to Baba, and I know that it was for me. I often shared that experience, that the understanding of the self was so dramatic that it changed everything for me. But then the further aspects of the discovery of the self, not just that I am a soul, but I am a child of God. Who am I? And to position myself in that way of being a child of God, and imperfection falls away, weaknesses fall away, insecurity, fear, all of that dissolves. Who am I? I am God's child. And just stabilize yourself in that awareness, and really, immediately, instantly, the goodness, the beauty, and the truth of the soul begins to shine. And that's who I am. I am a sparkling star, radiating all of God's qualities. And then it's not a question of effort. Daddy's been emphasizing this thing about not making effort. And of course the question comes, but well, surely we're doing something. So what is it we're doing? We're just keeping this awareness, just to give it that attention and keep that natural awareness of being a child of God. And instantly, with that awareness, many things within the self change. And of course, if things have changed within myself, things have then also changed in my relationships with others. What else am I? Who else am I? Who am I? The eternal question. And eternally and originally, eternally, Paramdham, and that's who I am, God's child. And that relationship doesn't change through the whole cycle. Whether I consciously remember or I don't, that's who I am. And the wonder of Sangam Yuga, that it's a reality, a very real relationship in which I have this practical experience. And really, especially in Madhuban, whilst you're here, it's a physical reality. Who is feeding you? Who is caring for you? It's Baba. In whose home are you living in? It's Baba. And then the translation of this awareness to when I'm back out there, of course, then that depends on the extent of my own surrender and whether wherever it is I have 3 feet of land to put myself down, what is my awareness there? Is it that it's Baba that's put me there? And if it's my desires that have put me there, then I can't say it's Baba's place. But if it's Baba that's put me there, then I can say that this is where Baba has put me, and so Baba's responsible for me. It was a lovely expression that Baba used. I think it was in the Murli of the 13th February, and it comes back to my mind very often because it's very powerful and true and makes you immediately very cautious and attentive. And that is the statement where Baba said, if you sit on your seat, I'm responsible. And the other half of that, if you don't sit on your seat, then Baba's not responsible. And so whether sitting here or sitting physically, if I'm sitting where Baba has asked me to sit, Baba holds responsibility. And otherwise, Baba detaches. There's an expression for God, loving and detached, which Baba teaches us also. And yes, there is a point where God gives an ocean of love, continual love, unconditional love, but then there is a moment also when God becomes detached. And I hope never to see such a moment when God says, now I'm detached. But God always is engaged and is always responsible for me. But that depends on me. And so eternally, through the cycle, God is responsible for me if I want God to be responsible. And I can have that awareness certainly in Sangam Yuga in a very, very real way. And then originally, what was I like in my original state? And originally, that first moment when I come down onto this planet, and that vision that Baba saw, the stars come into the earth sphere and into the corporeal world, and once they're here in the corporeal dimension, they take on a human form, but the human form is divine. Well, that was my original state, the deity state, the state of perfection, the state of purity, the state of all virtues. And then this is what meditation's about. Because in theory, I can understand the cycle. There's a state of fullness, then a state of depletion slowly, and a state of emptiness and a refilling. So in terms of logic, I understand there's entropy, I understand that this is how the cycle spins. But it's when I let myself become quiet and let myself connect with Baba, that in that experience I can really discover that that original state of the deity is who I am. when I hear these words from the Murali, that you belong to the original eternal deity religion, and everyone here has faith, has love and commitment, and this is why, even though the world's thinking that you're going to cross the Middle East and come to India, well, what happens if you get stuck in India and you're not able to go back? And many of us kept hearing these sounds from everywhere, and yet we said, Baba's calling, we'll go. And so you're here because of not just love and faith, but total commitment and dedication. It's proof. And yet, the feeling, the experience, is there a gap between my understanding of Baba's knowledge and my experience and the feeling? And it's true. Again, Nadi's class this morning, or was it yesterday, that what keeps us here is the experience. And I can forget words, I can forget other things, but I can't forget an experience. That experience is there recorded deeply into the soul. And so let me awaken that experience by giving myself that time and space. Let me get to know myself so that my deity stage is real for me, more real than the Kali Yuga stage. Because sometimes people talk about, let it be natural. And when they're thinking about, well, let things be natural, they're talking about, well, what's the point of following disciplines? What's the point of following a specific code of conduct? Surely everything should be natural. And what Baba's telling me, and what I want to make real, is my original purity and that natural stage. I don't want it to be somewhere in the future or somewhere up above. I want to bring that down here into my life now, so that I'm connecting with that original, natural stage, which is my own. The state of Kali Yuga is unnatural. It's not natural. And there's quite a distinction. And so, natural is the purity, natural is that dignity, those virtues, that state of perfection. And following Baba's code of conduct is allowing to experience that original, natural, divine state to emerge for myself. And so, who am I? I'm soul, I'm God's child, but I'm also a deity soul. And the rehearsal of that is now. When else am I going to rehearse for my role in Satyug? There's no other margin. Paramdham, there's no rehearsal. But now, today, there is. And not just for myself, but also a very beautiful thought. You know how sometimes when we have small groups meditating together, and an experiment in silence that we've sometimes had is, in meditation, emerge your angelic stage and move around in that angelic stage. What does it feel like? And how do you see others when you yourself are in that angelic stage? Another experiment. In silence, emerge your own divine deity stage and then move around in that deity stage? How do you see each other in that deity stage? How would you speak together? How would you move? What sort of interaction would there be? Well, let it be reproduced here, now. Experience that. Manifest that. And we've done that as an experiment for half an hour after our meditations. I'm sure it's an exercise that many have conducted in their centers. Just raise your hands if you've ever had that sort of experiment. Right, I expected that a good number of centers would have done that. But translate that, instead of just half an hour or 2 hours, into a day. One day here in Madhuban, today. Let today be an experiment in which I emerge and then experience that deity stage of interaction with everyone around me. And if I've done it for one day, I can multiply that and let it be for 7 days. And I can multiply that and very quickly it can become a sanskar. And I'm not creating a new sanskar. It'll begin to feel very, very natural, and I'll discover that it's actually my original natural sanskar. And to a certain extent, this is actually what happens in Madhuban. And so when people who are out there come in as guests and are part of Madhuban, then they feel they're in paradise. How many people have said this about Madhuban? Brahmins and guests, that we've come to paradise, that it feels as if truly it's a divine kingdom, the kingdom of God. But the more I experience it as a reality for myself, the more I'm manifesting it, and the more easily others will be able to see it and say, yes, truly, this is God's work, and this is what is happening. Then it's not a leap of imagination or faith to say that the golden age is coming, but they'll see that there is a divine kingdom that's operating. And so let it be an experiment of inner discovery through silence, but a reinforcement of that through my sanskars and action. Another experience of who am I? And I'm thinking of, then we'll very quickly skip through the period of the Copper and the Iron Age, even though, again, today there was this lovely image of how the real bhagats, the real devotees, also have that level of purity and freedom from the thought of the negative I. So many good qualities in bhakti too. But let's come back again to the confluence age. And not only as a child of God or God's student, but another aspect which is very important at this moment in time, I, an instrument of God. So the discovery of the self as an instrument for the divine. And I'm seeing how, in a way, that's the bridge between the realization of the self and also a letting go of the self. Now that's why this one particular thing is very interesting, because it's both things together. In the others, the eternal stage and the original stage is the discovery of I, and the beauty, the power, and the goodness that is there within the self. And at the end of Kali Yuga, where self-esteem is rock bottom, important to make that discovery. Never mind about effort, about conquering weaknesses and the vices and all that stuff. That'll happen when it will. But first, this discovery of the beauty of who I truly am. That's going to be the power and the strength with which I move forward into Brahman life. And otherwise it's difficult. And if there are difficulties in Brahman life, it's also because this first stage of the reality of who I am eternally and originally hasn't been made into my foundation. And I can do that here in Madhuban now, really create that foundation of my own state of value for the self and esteem for the self and real recognition of that beauty of the self. But this dual aspect, I, the instrument of God, and in that awareness, the value of the self, but also I, the instrument of God, and a total renunciation of the self. It's beautiful. And at this moment in the Kalpa, yes, we can emerge the deity sanskars and being the child of God, and absolutely important that I should do that. But now, as the Kalpa reaches its conclusion and God needs all of us to be instruments so that God is seen as being omnipresent. So wherever people look, they see only God. They see only images of God. They see only God's light. So that idea that has been so strong in bhakti, we're going to make it a reality now and then create confusion for the rest of them. But now that's the reality that we have to create so that people see God revealed. And in that renunciation of I, it's come up about 3 different times, maybe more, but certainly 3 times that I can recall through this season, in which Baba said, you become invisible and let it be God who's visible. You let go of the I, and then it's only Baba who's visible to the world. Before I talk about God being visible to the world, I want to go back to an experience that I've had several times. And that's how the situation where a person in a white sari, it's happened more to people in white saris rather than white suits, because in the Western world it's not so many people who wear white suits anyway. Even Baba's instruments wear their regular dark suits, and they look the part formally, which they have to be accepted by the world out there. But whether it's been me or somebody else, we've been on the platform and the person in the white sari is given a talk, whether it's 3 minutes or 30 minutes or whatever. And afterwards, people have gone to any other person in the audience in a white sari and have said, that was a beautiful talk that you gave. And now, if I tell you the people I've been confused with, it's been Westerners I've been confused with, it's been Indian sisters I've been confused with, it's been tall sisters I've been confused with, it's been broader sisters I've been confused with. You can't imagine, but it proves to me many times that the only thing that they remember is the white sari and somehow a light that's shining. They don't see the face. They don't notice the face. And so they don't recognize the person afterwards. It's just that light that they remember. And so you can see how to get to that point where people really don't see you and they see only Baba is not such a fast step. And of course, when we see not just Dadi Gulzar, but the other Dadis also, and how often have many of you shared that experience that it was like Baba was there. And yes, sometimes people have visions of Brahma Baba, but light. More often it's just that experience of light. And so if I keep Baba in my consciousness instead of I, not even that thought of being an instrument, there's a responsibility that's attached in that awareness of being an instrument, and we need to explore that a little. But at that moment of actually serving, it's just Baba. And Baba gets projected, and Baba reaches other souls. And it's Baba that touches them, and that's what they remember. They don't remember anything else at all. They just remember Baba. They see only Baba. And Baba had said, if you're lost in God's love, then you disappear, and it's Baba that they experience and they see. And so that beautiful stage in which there's been the renunciation of I, and it's only Baba that remains. Again, that's interesting, because sometimes when you think about the renunciation of I, and people think that it's a rejection of the self, or it's a denial of the self, it's not that. The renunciation of I is an invitation for God to be revealed. It's allowing God to be present. And so it's no sacrifice, it's no loss, there's nothing but gain. When we use the word renunciation in Hindi, tyag, we also connect the word fortune, bhagya, with it. And in this case also the same. The renunciation of I and the fortune of God being present. And then the other side, the responsibility of I as an instrument, and the responsibility there for the instrument to be clean, the instrument to be free, available, so that the instrument doesn't have strings attached that are going to be pulling. If the knife has a string attached to it and the surgeon wants to pick that knife up, it's not going to be available. Or if the knife isn't clean, it's of no use to the surgeon. And so, yes, again, that awareness of I and the goodness of the self emerging and the value of the self emerging. Now let me appreciate my value as an instrument of God. And in that recognition of who I am, prepare myself. There's this lovely thought that you have to prepare a place and keep it suitable according to the guest you're inviting into that place. You know, if you don't care about somebody, and basically you also don't care about yourself, and your house is messy, then if somebody's going to come, you say, yes, so what, you know, it doesn't matter. But if you care about yourself, you're going to make sure that your place is always beautifully clean, even if it's simple, but it's clean. And that's proof that you value yourself and where it is you live. But especially if somebody's coming, somebody you value, someone you respect and love, then you're going to want to have one fresh flower, if not a dozen fresh flowers, one fresh flower. You're going to want to have a lovely fragrance in the place so that it's welcoming for the person you love and respect. They're coming to you. If I'm inviting God into my heart, how clean does this place need to be? How sacred is this place if it's to be occupied with God? And so, if I'm to be an instrument for God, I value myself in that I know it is of immense greatness to be an instrument. And so it's wonderful fortune that I have, and I appreciate that enormously. And so let me clean myself and prepare the place that God is going to come and occupy and use. God has a lot of work to do. He's very busy. He needs a place to rest. Am I able to give him a place that's so comfortable that he can come and have a little bit of comfort and rest? And so, more preparation to make it a place that's inviting and welcoming for him so that he can come and spend some time there. Not a place that he comes to in which I'm going to complain and moan and groan and say, why didn't you do, That's not very inviting. But a place that's going to be welcoming for him, in which he can just come and experience love. And so, I value myself as an instrument, knowing who I am, but equally, absolutely in that awareness of instrument, I turn it around, and it's one in which I disappear, and it's only God that's visible and present for others to feel. And so, renunciation of the self, or of I, is really only throwing away the limited shell, the limited boxes that I had put myself into, the things that were actually quite restricting. When we come to Baba, very quickly we have to deal with the limited awareness of I in terms of Lokik things and position and possessions and external factors. It's beautiful. Everybody practically in the same clothes. And here in Madhuban especially, nothing that can indicate your Lokik position or Lokik anything, which is as it should be. One family, students at one university, or even little children at the same school, all in the same uniform. And so, whether you were able to let go in your own Lokik home out there, or whether it was being here and being part of the family here that allowed you to let go, it's happened. You're there. But the other aspects of I think even the question of culture, we're now so used to being in Madhuban and in that environment of Madhuban, and we've created a Brahmin culture which is really, it's not East, it's not West, it's just a beautiful experience of God's children. And it's such an environment in which even those who come to Madhuban for the first time, because the culture has already been created, it's very easy for them to just melt into it and flow into it. The pioneers who created that culture of Brahmin culture, 25 years ago, 28 years ago, they had a challenge. But through the years, it's become less and less of a challenge and an issue, and it's not an issue anymore. So even the eye of culture, that's gone. But still, one particular eye that remains, that has to be dealt with, and maybe it's going to be dealt with this season, so that then by the time we leave Madhuban, it's just God's instruments radiating light, and the wonders that Baba's talked about are very visible. But I'm thinking about the eye of my own ego in terms of my own intelligence, and the eye where I say, I think it should be like this, or I know that this is what is right, or all the things associated with I in terms of my own intelligence. And again there, no problem in having a variety, in having differences of ideas, because if there wasn't a difference of ideas, there wouldn't be a richness and a blossoming of creativity. And so when one person thinks, it's whatever they think, but when 5 people come together and they all share their ideas, then something that's absolutely new is able to emerge in a very creative way, but only if within the 5 that come together and think together, there's an acceptance and a regard for each other's ideas. Whether it's 5 or 500 or 3 who come together, and if one wants to dominate that, no, this is the idea that is right, this is the only idea that can work, it becomes a stumbling block not just for that one individual, but also obviously for the whole group. And so you've spent an hour together, but what's happened at the end of that hour is what Baba calls the churning of water. You know, you have a pot of water and you swirl it around and you swirl it around. What have you got at the end of it? Just water. You've got nothing else. But if you've got cream and you've churned the cream, and you have to do it in a very specific way, you can't just mess around with it, but it has to be done properly, orderly, has to be done with patience, with peace, with love, then what comes out of that is the butter. And so we come together and we churn ideas together, and if it's just the ego of I, whether in 1 or 5 of us, then at the end of it, it's often happened, hasn't it? That we'll say that, well, we did spend time together, but nothing's really very clear. But that's okay, because we've learned something from that, and next time we'll move on. But there's another way, and when 5 of us come together, and we do so in Baba's remembrance, we do so keeping Baba in between. And really, it's what does Baba want? Not what I want, or not even what you want, but what is it that Baba wants? And in that, there's something very beautiful. We'll all share, but out of that something beautiful will emerge, which is really something that's going to glorify Baba. There was a very beautiful comment that Baba made in the last meeting, and Baba said that all of you have learned to dance together, but you haven't yet learned how to perform the great dance, Maharas, the great dance, which means all of us coming together and being able to work in such harmony that truly then it's not one individual who's visible, but it's God who's visible. And through that Maharas, the harmonizing of everyone's sanskaras together, then yes, it's God who's visible. But in that harmonizing of sanskaras, it means the letting go of I. Then it's not I or me, but it's Baba. And so I'm seeing that this whole question of my desire, or I think, or I am right, this is that last step that we all have to learn to take. And usually things happen collectively. They don't just happen one at a time. When the yajna started, yes, it was one Baba who had that vision, but then within the of weeks, months, everybody got together and the task of establishment had moved on. In the same way, the task of coming to the completion of our effort, I think also is going to happen similarly, all of us together. And yes, it's going to be one or another who says, okay, I know this is what I need to do. I'm going to do it for myself, and I can't do it for others anyway. But that spark is going to be something that ignites others and brings about transformation. And that wave of transformation can happen very, very quickly. Some of you were here from the last Murli, but many, many others have arrived. And this question about 1 year, and Baba talking about the wonders and the chaos within a year's time, next Shivratri. And so what does that actually mean? And I think this is what it means, that switch of consciousness that can happen very fast, it has to happen now. And as it happens, so Baba will be revealed, the wonders will be the wonders of our transformation and the letting go of I and our desires, and through that then Baba being revealed. And that'll be the wonder, and the chaos we are seeing already, but more of the same and maybe a more intense state of chaos. But what we have to focus on is what we need to be doing, what I need to be doing. And so the discovery of the self. And then together with that, and I think it has to be in that way, first the discovery, and then what is it that I'm letting go of? And I jumped to that final point of letting go totally of the consciousness of I and my desires and so on. But of course, even before I get there, the letting go of I also is the letting go of my individuality in terms of following Srimat as distinct to following Manmat. That's something that I personally have to come to terms with. On the one side, God's Srimat, and on the other side, my Manmat, the directions of my own mind. In Srimat, yes, the great dance together. There's one Srimat, and we're all following the same tune. We're all dancing together to the same choreographer. He's teaching us all to move together in harmony. Manmat, and I'm not even following God's instructions personally in a straight line. And so definitely the question of coming together in harmony or unison, it doesn't even arise. It's just not possible, because we're each going our own way anyway, which is why bring people together in Kali Yuga, and what happens? Well, you see what happens. How many organizations is it that can actually work together at this moment at the end of Kali Yuga? Look around, and anybody who knows what's going on in the corporate world, or in terms of the political world, or in terms of the different religions, in terms of the different charities, and not their fault, but it's individuals all moving off in their own direction with their own thinking, their own ideas and their way. And when I come to Baba, first and foremost my recognition of who Baba is, and then my acceptance that in my life personally I will follow the Srimad that God is giving me. And the renunciation of the self at that moment, the I that's saying, but I want this, I'd like this is how it should be, this is how I'm used to it. And so I have to go beyond all those things and just say, I know that it's Srimad that's going to bring me the happiness that I seek. I'm not following Srimad as a favor to God. I'm not following Srimad because the Brahma Kumaris are telling me to follow Srimad. Why should I? I'm following Srimad because it's for my benefit. And when I realize that, then the renunciation of I is no problem at all. You know, when we talk about the renunciation of the vices, and sometimes how Baba positions that and says that, well, what are you giving to God anyway? So what's the big deal? Anger? You want to keep it? Okay, keep it. See if it's going to make you happy. What's God going to do with your anger? Keep it. But no, I'm giving my anger to God so that I can be free from it and I can have peace and love instead. And so it's totally for my benefit that I'm using this word renunciation, but it's really throwing away whatever is rubbish. That's it. They have a beautiful image that they use for Shiva, and they say that Nilkant, it's the one who has a blue throat, and they show Shiva, Shankar confusion, but they show Shankar with a blue throat. And the story goes that he was able to suck out the poison, and it was the poison that turned his throat blue, but he was able to take out the poison. And so this is exactly what God comes to do. And then Bhakti has its own images and confusions, but that's the idea, that God is able to draw out of us all the poison that had actually strangled us and had made us devoid of the peace, the love and the joy that we wanted to have in our life. And so God's doing me a favor. So it's not renunciation, me doing God a favor, but it's God doing me a favor. And so let me be able now also to see that if I'm following Srimad in my personal life, it's because Srimad is the only way through which to be able to have the quality of life that I actually want to have. And that's just the little thing that people out there don't know about. They want to have all the good things of life, but they don't know how. And here Baba's made us understand how to be able to have the quality of life which is absolutely the highest, the best, the most beautiful, the most elevated. And it's our experience in Madhuban especially, that the quality of life we experience here, I mean, can there be a comparison? Literally, can there be a comparison with anywhere, anything else in the world? And so, whatever Srimad Baba's giving me, whether in terms of the external disciplines, whether in terms of all the do's and don'ts in the way that I think and the way that my mind works and my consciousness behaves, let me follow that and I'll see the results of that And through my own experiment and results, I'll say, yes, I'm ready to renounce the I and really say only Baba and Baba. And then when it comes to that transformation, and here I am now following the Brahmin lifestyle and really having sorted out many things in my life, and I'm serving as God's instrument, then further along the path, these aspects of the I come in again. And so then the letting go, and it's really, I'm letting go because I'm seeing God. It's not just for the sake of peace with those around me. Sometimes when people think that harmony is really just letting go in order to keep the peace, that I'm sacrificing my idea for the next person's idea, how long can that work? Today, because I want to keep peace, it's one person's idea, tomorrow another person's idea, but I don't think that's going to work ultimately. It's going to keep peace for a short time, but it's not going to bring the results that I would like to see. It's not going to bring the results that Baba wants to see. And so it's not the impression of human personality or the pressure of human personality that I bow to, but it's the bigger picture. What is it that God wants? Do you see the difference? So it's not even say, here's two people living together, and because of one person being a dominant personality, another person says, I have to let go of I and just accept. No, it's not that. Because what we are doing, both of us, is surrendering to God, not surrendering to each other. I was talking about the situation of living with 2 or 3 others, and where just simply because one person is a dominant personality, then to give way and say that's the way to keep an atmosphere of peace is simply to accept the idea of another. And it may be that way in the sense that if within the bigger picture what Baba is saying is there, and then yes, to accept other ideas is fine, but I think always the first question has to be, what is it that Baba wants? And then dominant personality or not, peace or not. I think if there's that commitment to surrendering to Baba's idea, then if not today, then tomorrow others are also going to come round and accept that. I'm thinking about how when the Dadis first went on service, lots of powerful personalities, lots of people coming to them with lots of different ideas in terms of service. And yet for the Dadis it was, well, what is it that Baba wants? For us it's much easier today. At that moment, 2 contrasting things, what God is saying and what the world is saying. Today we have many models that we can use and follow and Madhuban. But at that time, Baba's saying one thing, the world is saying another thing. But at that moment, just so strongly keeping that idea of what Baba wants, and the Brahmin family grew, others began to understand, and today we see what the result is. And so for us the same also, the question of renunciation of I is only to God. It's not a question of renunciation of identity for any other purpose. The last thing I want to say before I open up to comments and questions, and that is that at this moment, in terms of Baba's work, what is it that I can do for Baba and the yajna? And when I say the yajna, it means it's not a visible thing, it's not a physical thing. In a way, yajna means Madhuban, the central core of the sacrificial fire, but yajna also means God's unlimited task and the huge sacrificial fire that's been created. And there's a word that Baba uses for the Brahmin children, and that is being a protector of the yajna. And so the discovery of I as a Brahmin, not only am I God's child, but I'm also the child of Prajapita Brahma. And so my responsibility as a Brahmin, the purity in my own life, but also to be able to inspire others for purity, to be able to create that sacrificial fire wherever it is I am, and to be a protector of that sacrificial fire. And in that awareness of I as a protector of the yajna, you can see that it's a huge responsibility, but not a responsibility which is a burden. Because truly in that also, the purpose of God's incarnation, purification of the world. And first my own purification, and then my role with God in terms of purification of the world. But I as a protector of the yajna, and it's a very beautiful responsibility to undertake. And I'm only able to fulfill that responsibility in that total awareness of pure thoughts and pure words and pure actions. And so if I'm to be a protector of the yajna, and I at this moment with God helping in that task of recreation, then this is a very important task that I have. It means then the recognition of I and that highest role as a Brahmin. In India, the caste system, of course, and topsy-turvy. But there was a Murali, I think 2 weeks ago, that all of you would have heard in your own countries, some here. But that described what is a Brahmin. Remember that, Murali? The specialities of a Brahmin. And the significance that Baba gave to us and the value that Baba reminded us of in our role as a Brahmin, absolutely the highest. And then bhakti again, a confusion, but now the reality. I as a Brahmin, who am I? And what is it that I have to let go of if I'm to play that role as a protector of the yajna? And so a reminder both of the greatness of who we are, but also totally the humility of being with God as a protector for God's work. A few minutes left for comments and questions. No comments. No questions. I can't hear you, so I'm sure nobody else can hear you either. I think we're just about to get a mic. Yes. If you'd like to come here, then we'll give you the talking stick.
I was just asking the question that when you, as you just commented, I renounce I in that true sense. Could you expand on the fact that how can I then accumulate selfishly benefit for myself? Because I think you do mean it in a different way, but if you could expand on that.
Say that again.
That any actions I do are for my benefit is a selfish way of looking at things, but could you explain it more in a spiritual way? Expand on that a bit?
Okay. the renunciation of I, but yes, still all the benefit is for the self. That's essentially your question. Yeah, an interesting angle. Thank you for bringing that into the picture. In terms of karma philosophy, whatever I do is going to be bringing results for me, good or bad, benefit or loss. And that's absolutely through the whole cycle. And the wonder is that in Sangam Yuga, it's possible to do actions just purely out of love for God, and they bring benefit for me, even though that hasn't been my primary motive. I haven't said that. It was like the other day Baba said, do you have this pride, or do you have this consciousness that you're doing Baba's work to create heaven for yourself? And people would say that that's selfish, and yet what you're doing is to create heaven, and yes, it will be for you, but that's not the motive that you're doing that work with today. And within that, Baba's comment was that your intention is to be able to help everybody else be free from suffering. And so yes, heaven is created and you're part of heaven, but you're not just doing it for yourself, you're doing it out of that pure love that everybody should be released from suffering. And so, although today I know that whatever I'm going to do, my good karma is going to bring me benefit, so in that sense it's not altruistic, but my vision isn't focused on, well, what can I do for myself? My vision is focused on God, and the experience of God's love is such that then the thought comes, well, what can I do in return for this love that I have received? And I'm thinking back to that moment when, within the first day that I heard the lesson of the soul, and it was so powerful, it really woke me up, it opened up. Second day was beautiful, God, but it was the first day that really was magic. But 6 weeks later, I had decided this is the life I want. And I didn't see it as renunciation. I thought that, well, all my confusion has been eliminated through this light that God has given me, that I'm blessed with. What I want to do is to share this light with all the people I know, because I know that they want it, they're searching for it also. I thought of all my friends who were all totally confused and how much they would benefit from this. And so I didn't know that 30 plus years later I'd still be here. I really didn't. But the motivation was really, God has given me so much, others should be able to share this. And so I think that we're using this word altruistic only in that sense, that the primary motive isn't for me, that I know it is for me, but I'm doing it out of love for God. So Elena's saying that you do it also for humanity. The experience of God's love, and then I want to share that love with others, and yes, it's then love for people also. Yeah.
Sometimes I find myself, the intellect isn't that clear about the balance between renunciation of the self and also keeping proper, taking care of myself and keeping proper balance for my own life. So can you give some suggestions on that?
Tell everybody who you are and where you're from.
I'm Jin from China, Beijing.
And how long you've been with Baba?
9 years.
Okay. And that was Devendra from the UK and Mrs. Eleanor from Mexico. So I'm curious because just in 3 questions we've covered the globe. We've we've covered the UK, Europe, China, Asia, and South America. So it just suddenly struck me that you do have the globe sitting here. Shashiben was telling me that it's been the 67th SisterJayanti celebrations, and so this time we had 60 countries represented at SisterJayanti actually, but she reckons that this time we'll have 67 countries represented. So, very good question again, Jim. And within that, I see that there's a slogan that Baba gave Dadi Janki, which is very interesting. And this is in Sakar, so it's way, way back. And Baba told her that you have to be not just the driver of your vehicle, you also have to be the mechanic of the vehicle. And so, yes, I, the soul, in that awareness of who I am, I recognize this, but I also recognize the value of this vehicle. And so I have to be the mechanic and be able to keep it in good repair so that it's able to do God's work properly. And I'm negligent if I don't do this. But within that, then, the subject of renunciation, and again, Daddy is a wonderful example of this, all the Daddies, but the renunciation of the self in the sense that it's not what I want. It's not that I prefer this or I want this. No, according to the system that Baba has created, yes, Baba has given us a time for meditation, a time for study, a time for service, a time for nourishing the body, and a time for rest. So let me follow that system that Baba has given. And if you just simply remember that timetable of Madhuban, in terms of karma yoga through the day, but the morning is for spiritual nourishment, the evening is for spiritual nourishment. So just keep that as a pattern, a guideline, and you'll find that both things are served, keeping the balance of what it is I need to do to value myself, but also the renunciation. But generally, it's a question of my desires and letting go of what I want. And it's not letting go of what I need, but the want that comes in. Okay. I think what I'd like to do is to just have a few minutes of meditation, giving a commentary on this idea of I and who I am. So we carry away that feeling and the experiment that you continue. Do you remember the experiment for one day? What was the experiment for one day? Correct. Be the deity here and now and try it for a day. As I sit quietly, I connect with Baba. And in the presence of the ocean, the being of truth, I discover who I am. I am child of God. My parent, the Supreme. The Almighty. I, the child, of the Supreme, filled with truth, with power, with purity. God gives me all His qualities as a gift, as my inheritance. That truth, that purity, and that power comes to me as my inheritance from my Father. This is my eternal state. This is how I was in Paramdam. Pure, free, totally clean. And from that world, I first stepped into the world of Satyug, a world that was completely pure. I, the pure soul, came down in a costume of light. I found myself on this planet filled with beauty and fragrance, in a costume which was divine. I, the deity soul, looked out through the window of these eyes And I saw sparkling stars moving in a costume of light. As I looked at the star in front of me, I could feel that connection of eternal love. And we exchanged happiness and love through our eyes. And gradually I moved through the cycle, and now I've come to the confluence. And now I, with Baba, am creating a new world. A world of truth and beauty. I keep this awareness of being an instrument of God. So that God's light shines and becomes visible to all. I keep this awareness of being an instrument for God, and also emerge that original deity state in my interaction with all around me. Om Shanti.